Hello everyone, Sweepy again. I know I just posted a video, so this is probably going to be my fastest back-to-back posting here. But we just had the Adepticon reveal stream last night on Friday, and they dropped some information about the Sentinels. And this is one of the factions that I've been kind of playing a little bit during that hiatus I mentioned in the last video. I'm pretty excited about this reveal. So I've been talking with a bunch of people online late last night, early this morning, and throughout the day as I've been doing other things. And I decided, what better time than now than honestly just to jump back in and make another video. So we did see Prime Sentinel, Bastion, and a Nimrod. We have the fronts and backs of these cards here. And then this is the Omega Sentinel. Her card kind of got pushed out in this image here on screen. So this is floating around on several of the major discords if you want to find it pretty accessible. But this has led us to kind of seeing the future of the Sentinels faction as a whole. So I wanted to almost kind of break down what we know about these characters and how it can kind of help inform those decisions. So I'm going to keep this up because most of them are in Jarvis Protocol, so we'll be looking at their cards there as well a little bit more clearly, but Prime Sentinel is not, so we're actually going to start with him. So this is the new 3 threat. This is where the Crisis, when this box comes out, the new Crisis set will be revealed as well fully. And I think that this is a really good 3 threat in a stat model. You can take up to two of them in your squad and roster instead of one. They're 3/3/3 with 6 HP. They do also have 6 HP on the backside, so pretty much identical fronts and backs here. And they have this really cool root cycling mechanic where they really care about root. Root is one of their favorite conditions to see on the table. So, maybe they have some splashing room in like an Elsa uh, Midnight Suns roster that focuses on root, things of that nature. Some other various areas, but they really care about that power denial as a mechanic, or I guess that taxing power as a mechanic. Um, and root basically, if you don't know how it works, you pay one power before you use a superpower, so everything costs one extra. Um, they have a very generic attack, range 3, 5 dice with a builder. But it does also, it's an energy, so it's a really good attack profile, and it roots you on a crit, so that's important. And then their spender just roots you if it deals damage for 3 power. It's 7 dice, also range 3. I think that's a fairly good, just kind of generic spender on a 3 threat. Dealing a damage is pretty likely for a 7 die attack and energy. Getting that root on, like I mentioned, is going to be kind of important. So I could see some turns where you're just kind of focusing on getting to this power break, get a root on someone, and just kind of chill. What's really cool is how they interact with the root. So guided infection and sentinel nanotech corruption, I apologize, are probably a little hard to read. We'll zoom in a little bit here. Uh, so when this character is attacking during the modified dice step, if the defender has the root condition, they can use the superpower, which costs 2. You can remove that root condition, and then you, as in this character, can reroll 2 dice, so you can hit a little harder. And then the really cool one that I really like, that I think is going to see a lot of frustration on the table potentially, if you're being attacked and the attacker has root, you can spend 0 if that attacker is within range 3. Once again, remove that root from the attacker, and then you can reroll up to 2 of the attacker's dice. So this is like kind of a mini Crimson Dynamo, very strong type of effect, especially happening during the modified dice step. You get perfect information because of the steps of the attack. You when you're being attacked, you get the last step of modifying dice before you hit that end of modification step where like a recal can be played, or like an Adam Warlock uh, style of recalibration matrix where it's printed on their card. Um, Otherwise, they have flight. Flight and immunity to bleed and poison is pretty cool. And from there, being able to take 2 of them, I think, has some pretty interesting implications for the list. Much like Mark IV's, if they're good in general in terms of like being affiliated, which I really think they are, with how they interact with Bastion's leadership, you'll probably see them quite frequently, if not 1, 2 of them, just because for making points work, going at least 5 wide, they're just good enough, I would say, especially in a Sentinels list. I think they start to cycle that route quite well. Um, So I think it'd be very important to, position with them aggressively if they're standing on like a secure or contesting like one of the new source extracts, which kind of function in a similar vein where you want to be near them at the top of the activation of the round. That way you can pick something up and kind of run around with it. You can root someone pretty consistently, and that type of power taxing can be important. We're gonna go ahead and minimize, and we're gonna jump over to Bastion here. So while it lacks the art, just a much easier to read card here on the screen. Uh, the new 4 threat leader is kind of insane. So he's a 4-4-3, and I believe, yeah, he's a 7-6. 7-6 is a good HP profile to begin with for a 4 threat. But then he also has DR to 1, so very good DR on this type of a model makes him really tanky. 13 HP with DR on both sides essentially means he's got 15 HP to chew through as a 4 threat. Um, and that can kind of become a very taxing situation. He also starts to play into a different sub theme of the list, which is degeneration. You're going to see this rule again in the future where the defender cannot remove damage until the end of the activation phase this round. So this means, the things that are running rampant right now with the Doctor Strange healing, like patch up and things of that nature, you really can't remove that damage, which is awesome. These can kind of slowly but surely turn down those big types of lists that are really prevalent right now. And then Rescue just came out very recently. A lot of people are seeing Rescue being run, so this is kind of a good counter to that type of gameplay where you're wanting to blast people down, you're wanting to hurt them, and you want that to stick. You don't want that to just be removed because then it's with wasted actions. Um, I do think this beam is really, really good. Basically, every success die face is going to help you so much. Um, and then suppression is one of these abilities that, on its surface, is not like the best. It's not the worst. It's very okay. But again, in conjunction with the new leadership, Operation Zero Tolerance, when an allied character makes an attack, if the defender would gain power for the damage dealt, they gain 1 less power, and if the defender has a greater threat value than the attacker, they gain 2 less instead. So importantly, these two stack together really start to add up, and then you add a root onto there. It's really difficult for your opponent to then make use of all of their power. He's also an inaffiliation taxi of a model, so round one, it's not. I don't think it will be an uncommon play pattern to watch him place someone range 2, uh, and then run. So he can also place himself range 2, and it's only once per turn per character, meaning he can do this if he's got 10 power and he wants to rearrange his entire team. He can, place himself range 2, walk into range 2 of a bunch of people and start placing them all around. So kind of able to rearrange the board to his whim, which is really cool, especially with like MK4s and Prime Sentinel, or Sentinel Prime, not Prime Sentinel. It's going to be a little bit of a weird naming convention. Um, but those big base models and like Nimrod, the newer 5 threat that we'll be covering in a moment, this like type of distance moved is going to really start to add up. These are almost full actions for some of them with short movements on large bases. And then once again, we see this root come in. So if someone gets dazed or KO'd, if the character is within 5 of Bastion, that dazed or KO'd an allied character, non-grunt, he can, deal a damage to them and root them. This is also really good. Out of action damage, and it's just guaranteed damage, is good. And then getting that root on, so then those little 3-threat sentinels can start to stack up their rerolls. Also very good. Things will die. You're playing an aggressive game plan, I think, with this. Something else that's interesting is how stun interacts with this. So while they do stack, they don't necessarily stack perfectly. From our best understanding of how the rules work, I believe what would happen is the leadership would trigger first, and then stun would trigger, as it is a non-player effect. So my best bet is that, let's say you deal 3 damage, this would say, hey, you only get 2 power, and then because of that, you actually only get 1 power because of the stun. It doesn't, I don't think, work in the inverse, where you would only get 1 power because of the stun, and then you would get 1 less because of this leadership. I might be wrong, but that's my initial read on it as well. So they don't perfectly stack, but stun is still a great condition with this team. Maybe not something to hard build towards, but still good. Um, let's go to Omega Sentinel. This character is super fucking cool. Um, First and foremost, a long mover. We don't know her backside, but we do know she's a 4 threat with 7 health on the front. I wouldn't be surprised to see 6 HP on the backside. That seems like it would be right in line. Uh, she has a charge on a long moving base, which is awesome. Her spender is pretty solid. A size 4 throw before damage is dealt is always really good to see. Once again, we're seeing the suppression keyword on a wild, so for each wild, they lose a power. Um, Omega cycling, which is definitely a big intro for adaptive nano shifting protocols. So she also kind of like a Red Skull or like Vision gets to choose a defensive type at the top of the round to kind of either buff. So she doesn't actually buff her Mystic. If she buffs her Mystic, what actually, or quote unquote buffs her Mystic, so she can't be advanced or pushed, she just gets 2 offensive rolls, which is that electrostatic pole. Otherwise, she can buff her energy, get stealth, and reroll 2 or roll 2 additional dice, and then again roll 2 additional dice for physical attacks, and then she gets like a bit of DR, but just for collisions. This lets her switch between them when she's being attacked or if she's about to suffer a collision. Very good overall. What's really interesting, though, in my opinion, is cyberpathy. We've seen this rule on Prowler recently, where when he interacts for the first time with a secure objective, I think his actually uh, might be secures and extracts. He gets a power back, but she's so good with like pay to flips because she gets to reroll up to 2 of their dice, and she gets a power back. So what does this really mean? For things like McCran, she's just obscenely good at it. It's not uncommon, I don't think, in this case, for her to run forward in round 1, flip a home McCran, and then run to a different McCran if is in range with her deployment, and try to flip that as well. Or even a something like a back B, I believe she should be able to reach with her distance. So a lot of good interacting ability here. Power really goes far for this type of thing, letting her interact 2 times. You could even do something where she walks and interacts with a back thing, and then walks up to the midline, grabs it, and extract, and she's still relatively safe at that stage. Very interesting character, especially with that electrostatic pole online. I get the feeling you'll normally want to start with electrostatic pole to begin with, before you activate her, and then be able to switch into these more defensive character types, or defensive types here, with Carapace and Cloaking. So I personally see this one being really good, especially with long range attack, or not long range attacks, a long mover with a range 3 attack. She's hitting a little bit past the midline. This is generally going to be a good attack with 2 rerolls, and this will be a great spender with 2 rerolls for 4 power. Very excited to get this model on the table, and I'm excited to see what she can kind of bring to the faction that's a little bit slower. And then we have Nimrod the Hunter. Oh boy. This is a large base, slow moving model for 5 threat. He's 4s across the board. He is a 7/7, and he is size 4. Nothing changes on the backside, so identical card front and back. He does have healing factor, which is not a keyword that the rest of these models have seen. Everyone else before also has flight, which is important. They can kind of just get around terrain. It's kind of their thing right now. They have size 5 dudes who just stomp on terrain with your 2 MK4s. You have your Mark IV, who's size 5, so he just walks over everything to begin with. But the other models, they all have flight, which I think will be important for some boards of terrain, so they can just kind of, zoom over top of all the size 5s that we might be seeing in the near future. Um, and I think it's just kind of cool. So he's got a really cool builder, modular attack type here between physical and energy. And he can give you an incinerator or root based on what he chooses. I'm gonna take a wild guess. You're gonna see a lot of the root when those little guys are running around. And then Shockweb, I actually think is a really interesting area attack spender. It's a very tight map situation right now for Crises. A lot of people are playing these really tight scenarios that are low scoring. And if he goes in, an area 2 on a large base is pretty like huge in terms of coverage. A 6 die attack is somewhat likely to deal damage. I'm not saying it's the most likely thing in the world, but shocking people on damage is pretty solid. And then this is again just a really good spender. Spend 4 power, get a range 3 8 die energy attack that throws away short and stops you from healing, seeing a little bit more of that degeneration. A good terrain throw, a good little portal. He can boost his defense dice. I don't foresee this being what you want to spend his dollars on long term, but I can see it happening still. And then, power phase, getting that +1 power is pretty solid. So a lot of this is really cool in conjunction with each other. They seem to really want to play together on the team, and I think that they all really line up well with Bastion's leadership. So how do the old pieces fit in? Um, Prime, first and foremost, I think all of these pieces work really well under Prime leadership. Dazing and KOing and getting a threat value. Now we can go wide enough to actually get, like, if we daze a 5 threat, we can give out 5 power. Sometimes with the old leadership, this was a little tougher um, to get all of the power out. There's a lot of scenarios where just to be affiliated, you could kind of only go 4 wide, and if you went 5 wide, you're looking at like maybe 2 twos, which kind of sucked. So it's a lot cooler now to be able to do this with some different bodies. I still think his rerolls are great for pushing damage through and kind of controlling the power, and it's just really good to have restraint cables, just really good control there, really good displacement. So I still think you'll see Prime or Sentinel Prime MK4 in some lists. I think if you are running Prime, it's at least in the question of running one MK4. Online and operational is a really good tactics card. Um, Being able to put someone back on their healthy side, remove all the damage and special conditions, and go from there, I think is really cool. It's very thematic. You're not killing them all the way, but they can still do what they need to do. Again, restraint cable is very good, especially considering this is sizeless. You can pull the Dormammu off the point, have a good time there. And then Cassandra Nova gives out Root and Slow for 3 power, and she can do this as many times as she has 3 power for characters within range 3. So again, I think that root cycling kind of comes in. And then Efficient Machines is a phenomenal card. I think this is one of those cards that people should remember is really good. Treating shields as wilds means all of the triggers that we saw previously for those suppressions, those degenerations, I believe there was a wild root, things of that nature, really start to add up. And this damage is good. So I think Efficient Machines is one of those ones to keep in the back pocket. You probably won't play Cassie every game, but with her buff recently, she's really, really good. I think this is a character that people should be playing in a Sentinels roster. Um, I don't have a perfect roster for you all, as not everyone is quite into Jarvis quite yet, but I do think there is some play to something, like running Prime and Bastion in the same roster and kind of going from there. I think it's really important to, think about this leadership. You want to be a lower threat than what you're attacking, so you're punching up. So it's really important to play models that are good at getting a couple of damage out here and there and, abusing that power mechanic. Marvel is based off of this rubber banding mechanic where you can kind of clap back at someone if you get hurt really badly. This helps to kind of mitigate that, and it's really good. So this actually hurts models really badly as well, like Beta Ray Bill, who kind of want to be spending one, taking one, gaining one, and getting an aggressive off with their DR to 0. Now, if they decide to do that and they're only taking one, they're never going to be able to double DR to 0 in that case. It's just not how it works. They'll, spend it down, take one, gain 0 power because they'll gain one less. And then, yes, they can aggressive, but now they're sitting on 0 power, so they're unlikely to actually get another bump of their DR. Being suppressed and being rooted also really sucks for those types of characters like Bill, like Jugs, things of that nature. So I think it's really interesting to continue to push that angle. There's plenty of characters that give out the root condition. I don't think you need to play around the root condition, but I do think it is an interesting like sub theme here. Running the sinister, and we know that there are sinister buffs around the corner. I know I'm talking to a buddy who's talking about Sable. We've talked about Groot. We've talked about Pyro. Maybe an interesting one would be something like Dracula, who can root you on a 7 die clapback, and then mid round you're not gaining extra benefit from it. You're actually probably getting rooted or hexed, and then he's giving you one less power. I think this is a really interesting interaction. He also has a bow, which the team kind of likes, so maybe something like Dracula can come into the list. Um, I don't really think there's many of these other ones that I would be trying to jam in. Loki's good. Professor X is good. Uh, no, Professor X really isn't that good. I lied. This guy probably not going to make his way in. Wild Root on 5 dice is not wonderful. It's better than the crit root on the little 3 threats, but they're also 3 threat. They're not Professor X, where he's a little bit sad. Shadow King is kind of bad, and Werewolf might be an interesting one. Being able to howl at someone and give them a root if you roll a skull, kind of an interesting thing. Um, but that's just kind of my beginning thoughts for it. So I think that there's some interesting chances to have a good roster. This is my, I would say, technically old Sentinels roster. I think in a perfect world, I would be dropping an MK4, putting in one of the 3 threats, and going from there. Directive 1, I think, is a really good card too. Again, remember that you have this in your back pocket, or if you're against Sentinels players, remember that they have this. Denying cover and ignoring line of sight is really, really good. And ignoring stealth is really, really good. It denies all modifications here, but cover is the big one that I think people kind of forget that this denies because cover is a modification. Um, is so good. You spend 2 power and everyone gets the benefit. Because it's just enemy characters don't get this benefit, which is really, really good. Just denying the need for, someone's hiding behind a size 5. Bastion is in range with his range 4 gun, but he can't quite see them. Cool. Spend 2 power. He'll always have power to start out with it. Might not be what he wants to spend his power on, but he always has it. To negate that line of sight break, negate their cover, negate all their rerolls, and just shoot. Just stand, shoot, bump, continue shooting, root, scoot, continue. So there's a lot of really interesting back and forth that can happen here. Um, I think Patch Up is a great card here. A lot of these bodies are big. You got the 9 HP here. I think MK4s have 8, 7, 7 with DR, and then another 7 with healing factor 2. So running something like instant recovery just to keep Nimrod a little bit safer. All of these are phenomenal options, and I foresee this being a really uh, I think this is a great leadership. And I foresee it being a really interesting leadership to play on the table in terms of how you want to gauge your output and your scoring and kind of slow things down. Um, Power denial is really cool, in my opinion. I am definitely an aggressive, focused player, so seeing something where I can deny power by rooting someone, and then anytime I'm attacking, they gain 1 less power, or maybe 2 less power with something like Nebula. So like subbing Toad out for Nebula is what I'm gonna do while I'm thinking about it. Um, Nebula is a great shout here. One, she's a robot, so she's on theme. Two, she'll shock and stun people. But getting a spender off while she can reroll any, and then she's denying 2 power, and most likely I think stunning you with that reroll any if they're contesting something. Um, Really cool. She heals a little bit. She's a little bit of a nuisance of a 2 threat. I think that this is a great shout as the 2 threat for this faction, especially with the inclusion of 2 3s that can score and be affiliated now. I think that alone leads you to be able to run some more out there splashes. I think I'm going to be playing something of this nature. I could see myself dropping and adding things in just to continue to test. And I expect myself to return to this when this box comes out. I believe the Nimrod, Omega Sentinel, and Bastion box drops the week before squad goals, so I expect to see this box and this type of a roster at squad goals. Not a lot of overlap with other teams, so that means it's likely to be a good pairing. pair like a fine wine with a lot of the teams that we'll see there. So just a little bit of my higher level thoughts, kind of rambling. So this is my Schmidio. Thanks for listening and have a great day.